Public comments?
No one signed up.
Discussion regarding city limits and the 50, is it meter or foot wide strip?
Foot wide strip. Randall knew that he would be running a little bit behind, so I request that we move on to the police department annual update, and we'll come back.
Police Department annual update. Wait till next week, or next month.
Nah. He's prepared 6 hours.
No, this is just my reference material. I started to do handouts, but we're trying to save paper. So, no, I just put this together about 10 minutes ago. The city manager asked me to put together some information to kind of give us an idea of what the police department's done in the last year. So I've compiled kind of a list of material that I think that the council may be interested to hear. We've got a lot of course, we do a lot of things at the police department, so it's kind of hard to try to scale it down to, what, a 30-minute presentation is what I got?
Yes, sir. About 4 minutes.
So I just kind of highlighted some areas. We were able to purchase 3 new police units out of last year's budget. We finally got our last one in, I believe it was last week. They'll be getting decals on them this week. They're the 2014, 13, I'm not sure which, I think they're 14s. The police interceptor SUV. We went to an SUV, and I'll get into some of that as to why we did. To talk about our police fleet a little bit, all those vehicles, 1997, and our latest vehicle prior to the 3 we just purchased was 2010. To give you an idea of what we spend on our fleet, because I think it's important when we look at the SUV type vehicle. We've got 5 Dodge Chargers, 4 are 2009, and 1 is a 2010. Last year alone, we spent $19,569 on maintenance on those 5 vehicles. The average mileage of those vehicles is 75,000 miles. Out of the 22 other vehicles that we have in our fleet that range from Crown Victorias to the animal control vehicles, as well as our motorcycles, on those 22 other vehicles we spent $13,000 on maintaining our Fords, and the average mileage on those is 122,000. We've got some that's getting to 200,000. We've got one that's under 100,000. So our cost in vehicle maintenance definitely goes to our Dodge Chargers. We're repairing front ends, we're transmissions. We had to replace a motor in one of them. So we will not be buying Dodge Chargers again because, you know, for the type of patrolling that we do here in Guthrie, they're not cost effective to have. So I'm thinking, and these also are a V8, they got the Hemi, and I've got the amounts we spend on fuel for those vehicles. I didn't compile it on the list, but the new vehicles are V6. They've got a heavier suspension. They're able to clear a lot of debris and stuff like that in the roadway, and I'm hoping that these vehicles will last the same way our Crown Victorias did. So that's why we went to a more utility type vehicle. One of those vehicles has been designated as our K9 unit. Last year we got a K9 added to our fleet of officers, if you will, by private donation. Also last year we hired 5 new police officers, so we got 5 guys that are in training currently. 1 guy graduated the academy last month. We got a guy graduating the police academy Thursday, and 4 guys, actually 5 guys still to go. We've got 1 guy that I've offered a job to. We're waiting to get the results back from the psychological exam and his pension physical. So in the last 6 months, we're going to have 6 brand new police officers on the street. Something else we did this year with the help of the council is the partnership with the Guthrie Public School System. 2 of these new positions will be the SRO officers at the schools. We hired 1 new dispatcher this year. We had 1 leave, so we had to hire a new one. We had a concert last year that was pretty successful. Bumper the Sun. I'd like to toot my horn on that.
Good tooting.
For the crowd we had and the resources we had, we could not have asked for a better event. We didn't get quite the support of the metro agencies like we typically do, and I think it had a lot to do with us hosting that event and not them. So we did it with what we could, luckily, it was a huge, huge success. Talking about calls to service, we responded to 14,918 calls in 2013. 2012, we responded to 14,550, so there's an increase of 368 calls to service of the police department and animal control. Total dispatch calls for 2013, total radio dispatch was 17,345 calls to service, which is an increase of 808 from the previous year. I know these numbers, I can sit and rattle numbers off until you get to the deer in the headlight look, so I've kind of limited it to some degree. Citations, you know, that's important to some people. Last year we issued 2,205 citations. We're up 408 from 2012. That number is typically a little bit higher, but due to all the officers' training and being shorthanded, it doesn't allow the officers to go out and be proactive in doing self-initiated activity. Excuse me. We arrested 599 subjects this last year, 10 more than the previous year. Accidents, we had 240, 2013, 36 less than the previous year, and I think that's the biggest difference I've seen since I've been here as the police chief. And I think it has a lot to do with some of the traffic enforcement, selective traffic enforcement, some of our high areas of accidents. I mean, for us to have 36 less than the previous year in a town that has, you know, a little over 200 accidents, I think that's pretty huge. And I think that's a compliment to the guys that are out trying to deter these accidents from happening by doing traffic enforcement. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, I can compile numbers to you blue in the face. I just picked out the things that I thought you guys may be interested in. Do you have any questions?
Those numbers you gave us, 14,000 calls, it comes out to about 40 a day,
It varies.
but that's average.
Yep.
That's a lot of calls.
They run busy.
I mean, some days we'll have more. Now, granted, when you factor that in, I mean, that's traffic stops, that's animal calls. This is the total dispatch.
I just wanted to put it in perspective of what
Yeah.
it is. in a
Yeah,
day.
you look at the total number, the total dispatch, 17,345. I included that because dispatch is a part of the police department, and that's including the fire department, the EMS, everything as well. So you'll see the difference of, I mean, a couple thousand calls based on what we do versus what's dispatched and what they do over there. But yeah, I mean, they're pretty busy,
Not just eating donuts.
not just eating donuts. You know, good days when you get to stop and enjoy one.
Can I ask you a question about the
Yes.
SUVs that you bought?
Yes.
How are they compared to the cars as far as the mileage, gas consumption?
You know, they're better. They're a 6-cylinder.
Okay.
They are all-wheel drive, so there is some difference. You take a conventional 2-wheel drive vehicle, make it all-wheel drive, the gas mileage will suffer a little bit, but we're still looking at better than what our Crown Vics and everything get by a long stretch.
So they're not hybrids?
No,
Okay.
no, we looked at the hybrids a little bit, but I mean, I want to see, you know, the bigger departments go to the hybrids and see how good a luck they have with them before we jump into that. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the hybrids, but in an emergency type vehicle, you want dependability, you want to be able to get there when you got to get there, and speed sometimes, and I worry about the reliability of that vehicle in an emergency type situation.
Okay.
So once Oklahoma City and Tulsa and some of the bigger agencies go through that and experience it, I'm more of a conventional type guy because it's reliable.
Okay.
No questions?
Okay, I guess we're blue in the face.
Well, some of you started to doze off.
Did you say something?
I'll be after the meeting if you guys have questions.
Thank you.
Should we go to agenda items in discussion? Should we talk about agenda for amendment 4?
If you like. Do you want to do a breakdown of that, or do you want me to?
Of course, this is the year-end budget amendment for FY13. So whatever was revenue that was come in over projections, we increased those revenue line items to take care of some of the deficits in the expenditure line items. One of them is like the sales tax collection. By the Water Resources Board notes, we have to transfer 1% of what we collect in sales tax to GPWA for debt obligations. If we don't need it, then we can move it back. Well, our projection on sales tax was too low, so therefore we had to increase that to match what we actually had to do. GPWA reimbursable revenue, we did receive some FEMA money or state money for some disasters. So we was able to increase that and apply it to some of the expenditures. Hotel motel, another one. We didn't project high enough, so we had to bring it up to what we presented to the chamber for hotel motel tax agreement. Fire is the same way. General fund did have to send a little bit more over to the fire department. One of them, the EMS agreement, we over projected that revenue, so therefore we had to make the difference up with the general fund.
And some of that has been solved through your recent rate increases that will help actually make those revenues for EMS.
Capital projects, some of the projects came in a little bit higher, so we had to increase the transfers to the appropriate. If it was a general fund project, then we took the money out of general fund. If it was a GPWA project, we did it with GPWA's fund. CMOM, of course, when we put the budget together, it was just a guess on what we had left to finish that project. We under projected, so we had to increase it for the money that we received from Water Resources Board plus the construction of the lines. Cemetery fund, biggest part of that was when the lawnmowers, weed eaters and that stuff were stolen, it was replaced with this fund. We created both the general and the GPWA stabilization fund, and you can see to the dollar amount that we put in both those funds.
And so your stabilization fund currently is at about 1.12 million, so that's actually amazing considering we didn't have a stabilization fund forever. So you made that ordinance and resolution, so our first year to be able to implement that was off of that year's budget, so we had to create that. We anticipate to add more to that, of course, off of this end of closing this past year.
But not to this degree.
Right, not to that much.
It'll be a lower amount. I just couldn't come up with a dollar amount today.
But you
Airport-
really have to true up this before you can really get to that position. So.
Yeah.
But what we didn't do, we didn't take what most cities will do if you're in the black, which we ended in the black for FY13. A lot of times they roll that money to the next year and use it. We roll it to stabilization fund until it hits a certain percentage, and then we're able to roll it to the next year. So right now, anything that our departments did not use last year, it's not like they went on a spending frenzy at the end of the year to spend it. They can only use what's in their line items, and then therefore the rest is rolled over to stabilization.
Airport grant fund's the same way. Actually, airport grant fund, we don't even budget for it. So at the end of the year, we do a budget amendment for what we receive from FAA and the state, because that money has to be transferred to airport fund, which is the next one, which is number 11. So that's the dollar amounts for both of those. USDA, we did loan out $10,000, so we had to increase the budget for that. It was for Willoughby's, for the facade. And the GIDA is just $1, so we just need to make sure next year we budget $1 more. And it's a rounding thing, but we didn't want it to be a negative. So any questions on the budget amendment?
So just to clarify, so because of the recession, so we've had less tax revenue over time, and because of the lawsuit, we've really been kind of struggling with the GPWA pulling money from tax revenue to put in GPWA to make for our operations. Is some of that, is that true?
No. GPWA pretty well stands alone with the utility sales, water,
I was
sewer,
gonna say,
sanitation.
last year's
Yeah.
number's off because we had a wet year. People
Right.
didn't use as much water. So we had
We
less
had lower
revenue
revenues.
coming in because people weren't using as much water through GPWA. It's not
Right.
an issue of sales tax, it's an issue of use.
Well, from our understanding is we weren't able to raise rates for a long time, and that was one of our problems. So, you know, we still had to pay for services, and some of that stuff was coming from elsewhere. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
us talking about that, no?
Yeah, No, GPWA, we basically got it to balance.
We did balance it,
Yes,
okay.
it's just that whatever the revenue was, that's what the expenditure was.
Okay.
The only money coming from general fund to GPWA is that sales tax that we have to, according to Water Resources Board note,
Okay.
which
And
is
it's-
the 1%.
But it's in and out.
Yes, and it goes back to the general fund. So tax money, GPWA really doesn't give any tax money.
They're just obligated to that 1% for the, basically for the covenant agreement. So,
Or like in a hotel motel tax, kind of that same wash, because of our agreement with the CVB, if it comes in, we have to kick it out. It's not we don't get to just keep that.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So that'll raise the budget. I think people fear the raising the budget, but they've got to understand the ins and the outs,
And
and
technically, we
it
should do
wasn't-
better moving forward through GPWA.
positions us nicely.
Yeah, because hopefully, well, I mean, God forbid that we have another drought, but if we have dry weather, we're gonna increase water sales, plus we've increased rate schedule in order to offset expense side, so.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, the lake filled back up, contrary to other people's
Well,
beliefs.
and once we make profit from the GPWA, we can use some of that revenue to offset other costs. Can we not?
Or put it back, what I will always suggest, put it
To
back in your
reinvest.
infrastructure,
Okay.
like our wastewater plant, et cetera. Always take, in an enterprise fund, you want to take those revenues above the cost of operations back into that same enterprise fund. I wouldn't suggest, now, if we were running our own electric company, like a neighboring city of ours, and it's just hand over fist revenues, they use that money to subsidize police, for example. I don't see us making such great revenues over there, because we have such a need for wastewater. We need a primary clarifier, we need water tower painting, we need some line replacement. It'll take us a while to be where we're above and beyond revenues to subsidize the general fund. I'd put it right back into that enterprise fund.
Yeah.
Flushing lines.
Well, I know also we have had some long needed repairs that we couldn't deal with because we're lacking revenue. Do you have any examples?
You can see, especially in vehicles and maintenance on vehicles, you can see, just like your home vehicle, it gets to a point where you're spending so much money on the maintenance, it'll make sense to eventually buy a new vehicle. And what we've done for years is we just didn't address those maintenance issues. Lucky, and thanks to y'all with increases, et cetera, we're able to take care of those needs and get a new vehicle. In 2014, we only are buying one vehicle. Don't get me wrong, we've got a long ways to go in a fleet replacement program. Really, the only way to solve that is find additional revenues to pay for that. But what happened for so many years, and fleet can especially say, we were just spending so much money on maintaining, y'all surplus recently, what, a 25-year-old truck? I mean, those maintenance costs get to the point, it's not worth what we sell it for. $2,000
But
repair
we're
on
so
a.
far behind the curve on these
Absolutely.
vehicles.
And I'll be talking to the finance committee the 28th, kind of about potential sales tax and how we could use that. And one of those is a fleet replacement true program, not what we do, which is.
We need to,
Go ahead. Yeah, totally. We wait till it blows up.
yeah.
I mean, that's what we do. And then the cost is more in the long run than it is in the short run. A good fleet replacement program will stop us from those maintenance costs. So we did. We were able to catch up on some maintenance major issues this year. So we had a good, successful 2013.
We did.
I know that Wanda will go into detail with the finance committee on that FY13 year.
Any other questions? All right. You want Randall? You want to talk to us about the strip?
Club or?
If that's all you have to bring.
You want me to move up here? Sure. 50-foot strip club, that sounds like a name.
It could be.
Remind you we are being televised.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the chief just stepped in a while ago, and he's like, oh, don't say that.
Here are some notes that we're going to prepare to hand out if you want to email what you're addressing.
Well, you might, you
Really
just
the
don't
last
know
bullet
it.
point. So I'll pass these out. Which is basically the city of Seminole. If you'll take two and pass it down. Here, you have that. If you want to take a map of it.
The discussion is the 50-foot strip. I've always referred to it as the Waterloo Road, but it's actually more of a U-shaped strip around the east, west, and south boundaries of Guthrie, but it's really not Guthrie. that strip is removed from what we really think of Guthrie city limits, what is the Guthrie city limits. And I think all of you have heard the history, back in the 70s, 80s, Guthrie didn't want Oklahoma City and Edmond annexing into Logan County, so they annexed down to Waterloo, de-annexed back to where the city limits pretty much is now. But left a 50-foot strip around this area to keep Oklahoma City and Edmond from being adjacent, and therefore couldn't annex. I don't think Oklahoma City or Edmond has any desire to annex any more land than they've got. All of them have more land than they can take care of right now. The question is whether to de-annex that strip, be rid of it. I think personally you're going to have a hard time ever getting any economic benefit out of that strip unless you annex all the way down from current city limits to Waterloo, basically. And the Seminole case is the reason I say that. That case, Seminole, the city sits over here, the interstate sits over here, there's a several mile stretch between the two connected by a highway, and Seminole wanted to get the catfish cabin and the other things up here on I-40, which great revenue producers. So they annexed along the strip of the highway and got those economic centers. They got sued over it and ultimately lost, went to Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said you weren't adjacent enough, connected enough to take those properties on the interstate, so.
So they looked at it like an easement case, like an abutting and adjoining
Yeah,
kind of position.
but they said there wasn't enough abutment and adjoining, just
right.
with that strip of highway connecting them, so they, because it had all that open space, that they didn't have to provide services or anything. So Seminole lost that, and really if you kind of look at our situation, it's kind of similar to that, with what you've got left down there now to what I call the Waterloo Strip. I think we'd have to be hard pressed to ever be able to enforce our jurisdiction there if we wanted to really enforce it without annexing all the way down from where we are now, south side of what we consider Guthrie, all the way to Waterloo. So we get calls occasionally, wanting to know whether they have to get a building code from us and whether they have to do our requirements. And then we had the situation, Sarah, a couple of years ago where we actually were trying to get the catfish cabin area, and then the county jumped in and said, well, if you do that, you're going to maintain the roads down there too, which, that's kind of a negative revenue producer at that point if we've got to start providing infrastructure. We entered into an agreement with another developer on Waterloo and I think around Broadway to do a sales tax rebate over a period of time if we could collect sales tax from them in the strip. But we also, as part of that, we're agreeing not to enforce our life safety codes and zoning codes, and went to the AG and got an opinion, said we can't do that. So I really don't see any great benefit in keeping the strip unless someone can find something that legally I've missed. So that's kind of the long and short of the strip. All it takes to de-annex is Renee's got the legal description already prepared, and just takes an ordinance drafted to de-annex that legal description, and it goes away.
And our intention was to put that ordinance on a future council agenda. We just wanted there were some questions by council members about, why can't we annex those said properties? And as Randall had briefly brought it up at our last workshop, I wanted him to be able to share that story of Seminole with you. So without further ado, we just plan to put it on the next council agenda for a vote.
Any thoughts, questions? Okay.
That sounds good to me.
May I leave now?
Yes.
Take my seat in the back of the room.
Discussion regarding agenda items. Other than that,
We've already done.
we have anything else?
I've got a couple of comments on the mayor's volunteer boards and commissions. I wish he was here. He's got Sherry and Jean that are gonna fill another second, third term, however many terms, and I feel like we've got 3 really good applications from people that we need to give some different people a chance to be on some of our boards instead of having the same people on there all the time. So I'm very disappointed in that appointment. And I love Sherry, and I think Jean, and I think they both do a great job. We have people who are really interested in helping Guthrie and want to get involved, and when we tell them to come down here and, you know, look to see what you want to do and go apply, well, and then there's no position open, you just reboot the same person that's in there. I just don't think it's fair.
To follow up, thank you, Mary. We do put in the applications in your packet of the other individuals. We do redact some of their private information, but you can see in your packet the other applicants. You, of course, as a council, can make that decision.
Sure.
And so there are the other ones that we received. At any point that you desire that the city attempt to have a longer period to ask for applications, we're happy to do that. I know that our department heads, we've recently talked about, we do want some fresh members, and part of even doing the Citizens Government Academy is to recruit those that want to be involved. What we're going to do better as a city is when we know that term is up, we need to start recruiting about 3 months before. So all the department heads have committed to starting that process earlier and trying to get more people.
Well, I know it used to be we couldn't find anybody to get on it. And I understand that issue. You need to reappoint somebody if you don't have anybody wanting to be in that position. But when you have people who are wanting to help out and it's new blood and it's, how do you know what they're gonna do? I mean, I think you need to give somebody a chance. It's just like having term limits on people. We need term limits. I don't think the same person should be doing it all the time. I totally don't, I just don't think that's right. Give somebody else a chance to make a difference.
So,
We need to pull the agenda item and give the mayor a chance to explain why he wants to.
That would be great if we could.
Y'all can table it, we'll just put it.
Yeah, there's that.
You
well,
can either-
it might be good if the mayor hears from you, if you
Sure.
have specific recommendations.
Sure, and
that
I
would be
didn't
helpful.
realize that this was coming up, or I would have already talked to him about it.
Y'all could vote to table it, which guarantees it on the next agenda item. Or you can do no vote, but I
I
think
would
a
like to do
table
that.
would, so whoever wants to make that motion, second at that. It is it's a non-consent item, it's a regular action item, so you don't have to pull it off consent.
I just think it'd be right to give him a chance to speak for himself.
Yeah,
That's his point.
thank you.
And again, if you know some people who did put in applications, if you have a specific recommendation, please let them know. For our next meeting. Okay. Well, let's see, anything else? Is there anything else? Okay.
Except for to always tell you what Exercise for Fines is a great program, it's on consent, but we love that program at the library. There's someone in this room that owes a fine that could exercise for it.
I'm just trying to get back to the city.
Get back to the city, so. We don't write tickets for overdue fines, we just want people to exercise to pay them off. Get fit,
It's a cool
Guthrie.
program.
It's so cool, it's great.
Well, if that's, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll sit in council.
Oh, I was just gonna adjourn us.
Speeding ticket.
If you had something else, it's time to do it.
No, go ahead.
Okay, there's no other discussion, let's, adjourn.
Just call.
Public service.
Actually goes in private.
How was that one?
Randall, I do have a question. Yes. This is my question for tonight, what do you want to do?
Is he in the house?
Yeah.
Let's pull it until next time.
Well, we want to do different.